Fun fact, I didn't have 10 most disappointing of 21. I had 9, which is pretty damn close. So let's just go ahead and get into this one. Number 9. Bionic Commando 2009. I was sort of ping-ponging between putting this on a best of and most disappointing. On one hand, the game's got a lot of good points, but it's also got a lot of bad points. In the end, I put it on the most disappointing because the bad just outweighed the good. So if you don't agree with it, then hey, I wasn't entirely convinced either. The issue is that for every good thing that the game does, the counter-argument of why it's bad is just stronger. The game's park environments are great, but that's only for the last third of the game. But the grappling hook mechanic is implemented well and it's really fun. But the only time you get to use it properly is like 3 areas and 1 boss. But the gunplay is actually pretty good, but the enemy variety is incredibly poor. But the soundtrack is really good, but the story makes absolutely no sense. And I have good points. Steve Bloom voices in it, sure, why not? But the game is super short, even by short game standards, and this is a AAA game. It is a real shame, there's making this of a good game here. The focus should have been more on the grapple, environments with a lot of vertical movement. Like, imagine if the fight was against other Bionics, including some with grapple arms like you. You know, like how the Groda fight should have been, but instead it was whatever this was. Number 8. Bionic Commando Riyadh. So this is a remake of the first Bionic Commando from 1988. I mean, okay, I guess I can see why people would enjoy it. I mean, it was a fairly well-known NES classic, and hey, people love the Insane and Reignited trilogy. Yeah, I didn't like this game. It's not about the lack of jumping that's a problem here, it's the clunkiness of the claw. I don't like how you only have 3 angles. I don't like how precise you need to be to hook onto things. I don't like how I can't lower myself down after pulling up or swinging without using a shotgun, and praise for its AI? This game? I don't see it. Maybe it's a simple case of it's a remake of a game I never played. The only NES game I played is Mega Man, Castlevania, and of course Super Mario. Whereas the other remakes I've played were from my childhood, and I enjoyed them a lot. I'm sure this game has its fans, but I am certainly not one of them. Number 7. Subnautica Below Zero. I enjoy Below Zero. But compared to the original Subnautica, it is a huge step backwards. One of the big things is that you're not necessarily stranded, which removes a lot of that fear of isolation. Hell, you get a companion early on who occasionally talks to you. The map, being much smaller and compact, gets rid of a lot of that feeling of the general lack of safety, given it feels you can hide in all these areas and say, you know, this. Also, the creatures aren't that intimidating. In the original Subnautica, I would always give Reaper Leviathans a respectable distance. In Below Zero, oftentimes I've just casually driven past the enemies, mostly because there's no threat. If I get grabbed, I can just shock them and I hardly lose any power. I get it was to improve a lot of the stability issues that the original Subnautica has, but honestly with how much smaller everything feels, it just feels like an expansion that should have been added on. A consensus people apparently had when the game was coming out. I do hope that if Subnautica 3 comes out, they go a bit closer to the original in terms of how it does things, because honestly, with how less threatening this place is, this one kinda sunk. Ha! Number 6. Forgotten Realms Demon Stone. I'm doing a whole video on this, which will probably be coming out in January, so there'll be a title card here for when it's out, or in the description when it's out. But to cut it really short and say the detailed stuff for that video, this is essentially a massive downgrade of the Two Towers video game, where you have 3 characters, where 2 of them are just completely overpowered and one's a third wheel. The fact that it is just fighting, very little in the way of story because it's hidden, and you get a badass NPC that made the Forgotten Realms popular, you only use him for 1 level, and you can't unlock him or anything. Number 5. XFree Farums Legacy. Okay, so to begin with, I need to explain the X Universe series because it's an obscure game series that pretty much nobody knows of. It is a 4X space sim game. It is very big, and it takes a long time to complete. But despite this, I enjoy the franchise, even with the flaws such as its autopilot and my crippling fear of losing assets since it's usually several hours of work being lost. But here's the thing. In the Universe games, you can have a mountain of things to get going and a huge area of places to explore, but in Farums Legacy, you have nothing in the starting hours. 4 areas, extremely low in the way of automation. The opportunities to make money are extremely limited, and within the first hour you're told to make a space station, which, in the previous games, was a mid-game objective. All these limitations make the starting grind boring, and I say this as a person who actually dislikes too much choice. Yeah, I know that doesn't make sense. I don't want to be limited to 4 to 5 areas and be forced to painfully grind for a mid-game item. I've heard that the rest of the game is good, but here's the problem with that. If the initial grind, even by X Universe standards, is terrible, you can say it gets better after X hours, but if the bit before X hours is boring, super restrictive, and honestly just sucked, I'm going to be less inclined to bear with it to get to that point. Number 4. Mass Effect 1. Put simply, this game has not aged well at all. I know that people love this game and franchise, but at this point, the first game is 15 years old, and it really shows its age for it. The thing is that it is a good game. I like the characters, I like the music, I like the world building. But at the same time, I dislike how you're locked to a class limiting your actions, though to be fair, I might be spoiled from Divinity 2 style games for that one. I don't feel like your allies' strengths and weaknesses mean much. The inventory system is pretty bad, even for 2007. Your movement feels so slow with a pitiful sprint, which, from what I've heard, was added in later. Attacks feel like they lack impact, and while the normal voice performance is great, I feel when you say goodbye or ask stuff, the quality of the performance drops drastically. Hell, apparently they make reference to this in Mass Effect 3. I don't know, maybe the later games are better, I don't know because I'm still looking through 1, but yeah, not the biggest fan of this one. Number 3. Sonic Adventure 2. It is purely an age thing. Sonic Adventure 2 was a fantastic game when it came out, and the music, even now to this day, is really, really good. But as a person, I didn't play the game when it came out. In fact, quite the contrary, I played Sonic Adventure 1 a lot when it came out. Just, a lot of the parts in 2 aren't good. It seems like a big step back from 1, honestly. For one thing, the story's all over the place with its pacing. Sonic Adventure 1, you had 6 stories, which intertwined a lot with each other, but they still had plenty of time to flesh themselves out. Here it's 2 stories, but each one's trying to flesh out the story of 3 characters, and not to mention it goes to so many different locations for no real discernible reason other than it's bigger, it's better. Then there's the controls. I don't know if this is just an issue with the PC port, but the controls are stiff and yet also slippy, making gaining speeds on turns basically nearly impossible. Not to mention the Emerald Radar is a straight up downgrade from 1, with you needing to get them in order compared to whatever order you wanted. There's a lot more I could say about this, and maybe I'll do a review of it someday comparing it to 1, but honestly, for what people consider the best 3D Sonic game, I have to say that they are very wrong. Number 2. Battle Stations Midway. Being a Brit, I have seawater in my veins, meaning that I love me some good old-fashioned naval battles. Nothing more cool than 2 big ships having a big old slogfest with each other. So, then I found out that there's a game called Battle Stations Midway, where you are doing naval battles in a ship in World War II, and unlike World of Warships, I don't have to deal with other people or aggressive monetization. And at first, the first 2 levels were really cool. Defending Pearl Harbor, protecting an island from being invaded. It was all a lot of fun. And then the game gives you a destroyer, and then it starts to suck. I know the bigger the ship, the clunkier it would be, since there's more systems and, you know, it's heavy and such, but this just feels too clunky, especially when you're attacked right off the bat so you can't get to grips with your vessel. There's no real tutorial for these ships either, though unless, I don't know, maybe I missed it or something. Like many of the games from this list, it's mostly been a victim of poor aging, but at the same time I haven't heard much about this game. I got it because I like naval ships, looking it out of each other. Maybe the fact that I hadn't heard of it much kind of demonstrates on why it's not really that good of a game. Number 1. Doom 2 Hell on Earth. What the hell happened, Doom? You started off so good. And I'm not even kidding. Doom 2 started off great. Okay, its level design was okay-ish, but it had a bunch of cool enemies, the super shotgun which has remained iconic as ever, intense battles, the same smooth and great movement and gunplay from the first one. It seemed even better than the first game. And then you hit the last quarter of the game and it all goes to shit. From the last quarter of the game, it becomes unfair. Extremely unfair. A multitude of tough enemies get thrown at you, your ammo reserves get run dry, it keeps throwing you in these ambushes where you basically get mowed down with no cover. More and more and more and more and more, and then we get to the final boss. Do you know the one that people keep referring to? Fuck this boss. It feels practically impossible. It's all down to luck on all occasions. You need to hope that you get lucky with getting the rocket into the skull. You need to hope that you get lucky with getting the required height before being knocked off or made into Swiss cheese. And you also have to make sure that you get lucky that the enemies that spawn aren't going to mess you up. It got to the point where after 20 minutes, I just gave up, no-clipped into the skull and just killed John Romero. I was not happy at all with this. I know Doom 2 has its fans, but excuse my rudeness, I don't know how you can enjoy the last quarter, especially on the higher difficulties. Please explain how. I would love to know where I'm wrong on this one. But that is basically my most disappointing games of 2021. It kind of sucks that I had more games this year than last year, but, you know, I guess we'll see what happens this year. Still, thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye-bye!